Hi, this is Ethereal Mechanics, video number 45. This is Breaking Relativity. This is for general audiences. Hello, my name is Robert Distinti. I'm an electrical engineer with 30 years experience. The theory of relativity gets its name from the idea that the relative motion between an event and an observer is all that matters. And that an absolute reference frame, if it existed, is of no consequence. And this is what catalyzed scientists to abandon the ether. They didn't disprove it, they just came to the conclusion that if it's there, we can't measure it, so what's the point? But later generations kind of took it for granted that we disproved it, which is certainly not the case. Okay, and this is the train example that was used in video number 22 to show that if the event and the observer travel in the same reference frame, they can't tell that they're in motion. And we're going to get back into the Michelson Morley experiment in a more detailed video, which will be the next video, using the train analogy. I was going to include it here, but it just got too long. So for any questions about Michelson Morley, hold them for the next video. Okay, to be clear, the ether was never disproved. It was just deemed irrelevant or unmeasurable, even if it did exist. However, from the training, we can obtain all of the same relativistics except that effects can also be explained in terms of motion relative to a medium, which I call immediate motion, or absolute motion if the medium is still. I kind of use immediate and absolute in almost interchangeable, because absolutes I like better because it's more of a contradiction to relative. But you know, it's really the immediate reference frame of the item, the observer moving through the reference frame. We'll discuss it more in the next video. Moreover, magnetism is the Achilles heel of relativity. All attempts to explain magnetism in terms of relativity fail the reciprocity test. Now, if you already got one of my previous emails, there is a Veritasium video. It's here. I'll try to put the link in the video. You should be watching that before you should put this on pause and go watch that before you continue. So in the Veritasium example, they have a wire, and they call it the kitty, which is just a free positive charge. And there's no current in the wire, and there's no force exerted on the free charge. Fine, no problem. Then what they do is they put a current in the wire. And what they say is because the current is moving, it experiences length contraction, so there's more charge here. But there's still no effect on the wire. And they're saying this is due to coulombs. I'm sorry, if you got more charge here, okay, you should experience an attractive force. But they say, oh, there's none. And they're right, there is none. But it's not because there's length contraction going on here. It's all about absolute motion. And we're going to get into all that. In the next video, they correctly show, and this is correct, that this with a current here, but not with, the length contraction is not part of it, but with the current here, there is going to be an effect on this charge, but it's not going to be as a net force on it. Okay, so in part 2 in the Veritasium, they say, well, okay, if I put the charge in motion to the same speed as the current, what's going to happen is the positive charges are going to experience length contraction, and the negative charges are going to go back to their normal spacing. And because they're trying to explain this in terms of Coulomb's model, they're saying, well, these excess positive charges are now going to put a repulsive force on this charge. Okay, I have big problems with that. Because what about reciprocity? Okay, if this is now causing a force on this, then we must also explain a force on this guy in this direction. And you would think by this definition, what they're showing here, okay, we got these extra forces, that's going to cause a repulsive force, so we're okay. No, that's not how they explain it. They explain it in terms of the fact that from the perspective of the wire, they're saying here that because this is a moving charge, from its perspective, from its reference frame, it appears that the positive charges, because their motion now, this is moving at the same speed as these. So the relative motion is not this and this. The relative motion is between this and this. So these experience the length contraction. So if we take that explanation from the perspective of the wire, the charges here are the ones in motion. So they experience length contraction. And from the perspective of the wire, well, this guy can't do any length contraction because there's only one. So there's no increase in charge. But if positive charges are attracted by, negative charges are attracted by positive charges, and then what they're showing is that the force, both forces are going to be in the same direction, not opposing like they should be. So it looks like using the theory of relativity, we've basically invented an electromagnetic propulsion system in violation of Newton's third law. Okay, and this is the way they're trying to use relativity to explain this, but they fail the reciprocity test. Because if the reciprocity means the force would be on this side, okay, but you can't explain that using relativity the way they have applied it to get the answer they got over here. And let me give you a 3 spaceship example to show you that I have a big problem with this length contraction experiment. Let's say I only had 2 spaceships and they're moving at speed, and I'm observing them. So if I'm observing them, then they have to length contract. Well, what happens? Does this spaceship speed up or this one slow down? I can't tell. It's ambiguous. Well, what if there's a 3rd spaceship? Well, does this one stay the same speed and this one speed up? I mean, well, come on. This is ambiguous. There's no explanation of how these things are going to length contract. And ambiguity, rule of acquisition number 17, ambiguity is for mystics. Ambiguity is a hallmark of junk science, religions, politicians, and fortune tellers. And I'm adding this one now. It's also the theory of relativity has become ambiguous in junk science. And here's the other problem I have. Okay, what they show in the first example is that because this charge is standing still from its perspective, this charge, because it's moving, this current in the wire does length contraction. But if we had the other charge, but when the charge is in motion, well then these guys don't length contract, it's these guys that length contract. So if you had both charges at the same, present at the same time, each would see something different. You have different, another object doing 2 different things based on how it's observed. That's ridiculous. Just said that. Worse. Let's go back to the example. This kind of turned on its side from before because I couldn't fit it on the paper. So you have a charge here that's stationary, and you get a current in the wire. Let's say it's going to be a closed loop of wire. And let's say we induce the current by collapsing a magnetic field in the wire. This kind of should be closed. This is a closed wire here. That's just the way I drew it. Well, that means that this current is in motion, this current is in motion, this current is in motion, this current is in motion. That means all these negative charges are going to length contract. But wait a minute, that means where did all these extra charges come from to get all this length contraction? So now we have voodoo going on because now negative charges have to appear out of nowhere to satisfy this relativistic explanation. This is getting to be outrageously stupid. But now if we go to Ethereal Mechanics and we use the absolute velocity of everything, we're going to come up with a very simple explanation of how this system appears to obey relativistic physics when in fact it's all based on absolute motion. So let's say that wire is moving. Let's say there's an absolute reference frame down here somewhere. We don't know what the absolute reference frame is, let's say. And the speed of the wire relative to that absolute reference frame is W. And let's say the current speed is Y plus W. So Y is the speed of the charges relative to the wire. So the speed of the current relative to the absolute reference frame is going to be Y plus W. And let's say the speed of the charge relative to the absolute reference frame is V. And we're going to use term number 4 in new electromagnetism. We're going to omit the denominators for brevity, so I don't have to write all these fractions here. So the force is going to be Km, and the number of negative charges are S. Excuse me, the negative charges are I, and the number of positive charges are S. So the first thing we're going to do is compute the effect of the stationary charges S on Q, which is the sole positive charge, the kitty they call it. So we take the S times Q times the velocity of the wire, because these move with the velocity of the wire, plus the velocity times the velocity of the charge. Okay, in this case here, the velocity is non-zero. Okay, in this case it's 0. So we're going to make this for both cases. And now we have to compute the effect of the negative charges on the kitty charge. Okay, and that's Km times the I current times the Q plus the velocity of the current, which is Y plus W, times the velocity of the kitty charge, which is V. Now since this is not relativity. This is new electromagnetism where everything is in balance. Okay, S equals I. So we can replace either one of those. We're going to replace I with S. And then we can combine this down. And then we find out that the force acting on the charge is based on the current speed relative to the wire, has nothing to do with the absolute reference frame, and V of the kiddie charge, which is relative only to the absolute reference frame. That's interesting. Thus, the speed of the charge relative to the wire is irrelevant. It's only the relative velocity of the wire, of the charge, is relative to the wire. Because why? This is a balanced system. This has got equal number of positive and negative charges. And therefore, it's going to look like it obeys the theory of relativity, where it's relativistically invariant. It's only the velocity of the current relative to the charges. The difference here is this isn't balanced. And that's why its absolute velocity matters. And we're going to do experiments later to show you that's indeed the case. But the good thing about this is the forces are reciprocal. This does not fail the reciprocity test. But when this has zero absolute velocity, just like they said in Veritasium, zero absolute velocity makes the force go to zero. Okay, but when the force is non-zero, that's when you see attraction or repulsion based on the direction of speed. Okay, because in ethereal mechanics, because only absolute motion, which is really the motion relative to the ether, an object is not different things to different observers. And guess what? We didn't have to bolt on the Lorentz factor to get the correct answer. All the fudge factors that relativity needs to bend its gibberish to make it agree with observation are already part of the electromagnetic equations, because the electromagnetic equations are not theories. They are measured effects. And therefore, you shouldn't have to bolt anything onto them. And we didn't have to have charges appear out of nowhere to get an answer. And let me show you a case that highlights what we just demonstrated with the Veritasium example. This is called the homopolar paradox. And what we have here is we have a disk magnet, and I'm showing it from the side, connected to a motor. And then we have a copper disk, also connected to a separate motor. And then we have a voltmeter with brushes going from near the center to the outside of the disk that will measure any voltage induced in the disk. And guess what? You could take this disk magnet and you can spin it at any direction at any velocity, and you will never see a voltage induced in the voltmeter. On the other hand, if you spin the disk, you're going to get a voltage. And the voltage is independent of the velocity of the disk magnet. It only depends on the absolute velocity of the disk. Again, absolute velocity. And if you use new electromagnetism, you find out exactly why and how it works. It's a very simple thing. I think I have a paper on it there somewhere. Now, somebody might say, well, yeah, it's the magnet inducing in the closing path, of the stationary closing path of the voltmeter. And I say, okay, well, try this on for size. Open this circuit, spin either one, all you want to do, either way, and then short circuit this. And then tell me where the back EMF that's going to break the motor comes from. It's going to come in the disk, not the closing path. So what did we learn? When a system is charge balanced, its motion relative to an absolute reference frame is irrelevant. Because if you did the same calculation that they did on Veritasium, but using two parallel wires instead of a wire and a charge, you're going to find out that the absolute velocity of that experiment will not matter at all. Okay, and since Coulomb forces are the most powerful forces, everything is driven in such a way to balance charge. So we have the appearance that only relative motion matters, and that is the basis of relativity. But what about out-of-balance systems? Well, there are upcoming in the ethereal mechanics around summertime, there's going to be experimental demonstrations which show interesting effects that occur when systems are imbalanced. But these are, again, in later videos. And the experiments comprise of standard items that can be purchased from Amazon or hardware stores. But let's finish breaking relativity. We'll come back to that later. Okay, relativity is equivalent to alchemy. How am I making that statement? Well, if I had a gold coin and I shot that gold coin off at near the speed of light, according to relativity, its mass is going to increase, and the closer I get to the speed of light, the mass is going to go to infinity. So what are they saying? They're saying that gold atoms appear out of nowhere? I mean, this is like the alchemist's dream, to make gold appear from nothing. At least the alchemist said they had to make it from a base metal or something, and they had to go find the philosopher's stone to mix it with the gold to transmute it. Here, we're better than that. We don't need anything else. We could just take gold and make a lot more gold. That's every relativist's dream. In all seriousness, how can a major scientific theory tell me that the length of an object will contract or expand even, or that the mass of an object will increase, okay, when the speed increases, when it does not even provide a model of matter? I mean, that's ridiculous. Think, what if I were to build, someone came to me and said, you need to build a starship that can go half the speed of light. Okay, well, according to relativity, it's mass. Well, is that mass going to occur? Where is that mass going to occur? Is that going to cause metal fatigue? Okay, where is that length contraction going to occur? Is that going to blow seals and evacuate the air and suffocate everybody? Without knowing exactly how and where things are going to contract or mass is going to appear, okay, I would walk away from that job. I cannot use these ambiguous models. Okay, again, ambiguity is for mystics. Now, some of you that watch the video series already know that we've provided a gateway model for matter. We have a simple model of the electron and the proton, and I'm going to show you in later videos using the Platonic versions that there is length contraction and time dilation, which is actually a material process called process dilation, occurs. And the inertia is simply an electronic state of matter. You've seen that in the previous videos. You can go to video number 38 to see that. The video name is Mass Murder. And again, there'll be all videos on these using the new Platonic models. If you'd like to look at the old gateway models, you can go to distinti.com, docs, NG PDF. Most of those things are already in there. Again, this is just a gateway model. It isn't perfect, but it gets our foot in the door. And let me explain to you what I mean by absolute effects. You got two ships on the ocean. We're going to use the water as the analogy for the ether, and the ships for a particle and an event and an observer. Okay, at any motion of this ship, the motion and what's affecting the ship is only what's in its immediate vicinity. What's in its absolute motion relative to its reference frame is the only thing that matters. Okay, I also call that the immediate reference frame. It's whatever is here. There could be a mountain over here that slides into the ocean, causing a tidal wave. But that doesn't matter, because what's happening to this ship right now is only what's occurring at its immediate location and its absolute reference frame relative to the ether. Later on, when these effects get there, they will disturb the ship. Okay, but there could be an island or something in the way which causes these waves to bend around. And because these waves can bend around the island, because of the way the island is diffracting the waves, then how these waves affect this ship is independent of the reference frame of that island. And so it's not the difference in the reference frames that matters, it's how the energy actually absolutely hits the observer. And it's not the relative motion, because over here we could say, well, if this ship is traveling this way, and it's creating a wake in the water, and this ship is traveling this way because it's this wake in the water, it has nothing to do with the relative reference frame, because this guy can turn around and not get hit by the wake of this guy. So its velocity relative to this reference frame is irrelevant. Because as long as this wave is in motion, how it couples to this wave depends on its velocity, its immediate velocity when that wave hits. It has nothing to do with the relative motion between, because this guy could change course by the time this wave hits this guy. And so by trying to reconcile this guy as a reference frame at the same time this wave hits, that's where you get a lot of your ambiguities. Okay, everything has to be done by absolute effects in the immediate reference frame. Okay, and then we go on to stellar aberration. In video number 22, we showed that special relativity seemed to provide a sensible explanation of stellar aberration, but then general relativity ruined it. And the Ethereal Mechanics solution, which is in video number 23, by accounting for all the ether motions, which is, the whirlpools around the Earth, and this is the Earth in the summer and the winter, and the whirlpool around the sun, as well as the consumption of ether, we come up with the same stellar aberration by considering how the waves from that distant star are affected as it goes through all that. And so it's the immediate reference frame and how the ether bends the light. That's the important part, not the reference frame of the distant star. That's what relativity's explanation is. Precession of Mercury. In video number 30, the explanation offered by general relativity causes planetary orbits to become more elliptical and unstable. Eventually the planets will be thrown off, which means that all of the planets in the solar system should be either elliptical or been thrown off long ago. In ethereal mechanics, because of the very slight ethereal drag on a body, that the velocity of a planet will eventually decay to a nice, stable, circular orbit. And that's what the majority of the objects in the solar system are in. They're near or at a very stable circular orbit. I'm sorry, this was a thought experiment for the next video, which is on Michelson Morley. I'm going to basically say, let's say you have two, this shouldn't have been here, but I'll talk about it. You have two spaceships going out a quarter of the speed of light from a stationary buoy. You have another buoy that sends a light beam that's going to go past these two sensors on each ship. And you can show by considering only absolute motion relative to an absolute reference frame that they're going to get the same answer. You don't need time dilation. You don't need length contraction. I mean, it's not that those things don't exist here. It's just that they don't affect the answer you get. Or they don't affect the fact that you're going to get the same answer. So what are we left with? There are no usable elements of relativity left. Length contraction is ambiguous. Time dilation is ambiguous. E equals mc squared is alchemy. Gravity bends space. So space, how can space be empty? There's no model for matter. Relative motion can't explain magnetic effects. They say objects behave differently based on how they're observed. That leads to all kinds of problems. And general relativity shows us a universe where circular orbits are very rare, and that increasing elliptical orbits is a condition of overunity. And general relativity does not explain why there are no counter-rotating objects at all in the solar system or in the galaxy. And really, engineers can still use a flat Earth model, but there's nothing engineers can use for relativity. And people say, well, what about the design of cyclotrons? And I can show you a simpler way to deal with the things that look like your mass is increasing. It's really an electronic state of your particle. Ethereal mechanics, matter is composed of inertially charged particles, which I'm calling pretons. The framework is the ether, which is composed of ethons. It's a very different ether from the old ether model of years gone by. It's not the same. Okay, length contraction is an electronic effect. Time dilation is really process dilation. That's an electronic effect. It's no longer E equals mc squared, which says that energy and matter can appear out of nowhere with energy. No, it's just inertia, which is an electronic state, and energy, which is an electronic state. So you're just converting energy to energy. That's not a big deal. Okay, gravity. Pretons consume ether, creating a depletion region about massive bodies. Ether accelerates toward the massive body, which couples matter through electromagnetic induction. Inertia, objects accelerate through ether, coupling through electromagnetic. So weight and inertia are identical effects. And the cool thing is, if you use the principle of equivalence that said that weight and inertia are similar, well, in the theory of mechanics, not only do I show that they're the same, but I show they're both two-body phenomena. Okay, and everything can be explained through absolute motion relative to the ethereal reference frame, and everything happens due to the energy in the immediate vicinity of the object that's responding to the effects. Stellar aberration is well explained when all effects are considered properly. And ethereal mechanics explains the precession of Mercury. Orbits decay to circular orbits in only one direction around a star. In the counter-rotating direction, orbits decay rapidly until sucked into the star. So to the apostles of Albert, I will no longer accept any defense of the theory of relativity. Ethereal mechanics provides a simpler explanation of the universe using absolute reference frames, or immediate reference frames if you like. I find that the apostles of Albert are so good at twisting reality to obtain any answer, and you can look at the Veritasium example as an example, that it's pointless to even argue with them. And I really don't have to disprove relativity to provide a new explanation. However, sometimes you just have to kick the hornet's nest. So what's next? We're going to have video number 46, which is Michelson Morley in the absolute reference frame. Don't know when that's going to be produced. I have to take a break to finish a new math construct. It's not that I'm having a problem, it's just it keeps exploding. Before it was just going to be addition to math. I think it's going to be making a lot of changes. It's getting bigger. I got to get it finished and get it out the door. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for that, we may be applying other gateways. I don't know. I really want to get this out of my hair. Once it's gone and accepted, if it gets accepted, then the video is a new math construct. When they're going to occur, I don't know. And the Protonic field models then will be a very simple thing after we have this under our belt. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for donating. Sorry this was a long video. Have a nice day. Take care.